Welcome to Module 5, C# arrays. Up until this point, we've spoken there's 4 modules before this that we've parsed through. And the last module was about loops. So it's only fitting to jump into arrays right after loops. So let's get started. So what is an array in the first place? Well, an array is like a variable, right? It occupies a storage location in your random access memory, in your virtual memory. But it's a little more than that. So when a variable is saved to your memory or to your virtual memory, your CPU randomly selects a spot in your memory to store that data, right? And when your CPU does this, it also has to remember in a roundabout way where that memory truly is. With an array, it's a little different. An array still acts like a variable where a singular memory location is selected randomly within your virtual memory. But something interesting happens. An array occupies, depending on the amount of positions the array has, a congruent amount or a congruent set of memory locations. The array itself selects a random location for that to be, but then each storage location occupied by the RAM based on the position of the RAM or the positions in the RAM or the elements or items that sit in the RAM, or sit in the array. So let's say there's 3 items that are sitting in your array, 3 elements. Those 3 elements would sit congruent to each other in the RAM, which makes it far more efficient than initializing a bunch of variables. Because when you initialize an array, you're basically initializing multiple variables that sit right next to each other. They're not randomly dispersed through the program. And you can store multiple values in your array. Now, arrays are not primitive types. I know C# doesn't really go into the weeds about what a primitive type is versus a non-primitive type like Java does. An array is not a primitive type because it inherits from the object class. Anything that derives from something else is not primitive. When that deriving occurs in such a way that the type itself has no atomic element, for instance, an integer has no atomic element below it, it is the base, the root, then that's when you know you have a primitive type. So what are the properties of an array? Well, let's quickly gloss over this because as this module progresses in the next micro lectures, we're going to talk in great detail about the rest of these. So there's a single dimensional array, which is an array that has just one line of elements, items, or if you want to think about them as variables, so be it. You have a multi-dimensional array, which a multi-dimensional array is an array within an array, or arrays within an array. You can think of that as an array being 3-dimensional, or 4-dimensional, or 5-dimensional, depending on how many arrays are sitting inside the arrays, which are sitting inside the arrays. Now, this can become very daunting. Multi-dimensional arrays normally bite the hands of most individuals who are just starting out, but they're very, very powerful. And of course, we have the vaunted jagged array. Jagged arrays are a holdover from C and C++. So a jagged array in a very simple explanation is an array of arrays, and each member array has the default value of nothing, null. Please understand that null does not mean 0. We have not spoken about null in great length, but null does not mean 0. Null means nothing, absolute nothing. There is nothing there. You can think of it like this. I have a cup. All right, I have a cup. It's not showing up, but I have a cup. That cup can be filled with something, or it can be filled with nothing, right? I guess theoretically speaking, it would be filled with air, but I can't drink air. So within the context of what the cup's purpose is, it's filled with nothing. And that's what null means. So when my cup has no liquid or even a solid in it, in my 3-dimensional understanding of our universe, the cup thereby is null. The cup is assigned the value of null because there's nothing in the cup based on what the cup is supposed to be used for. This is a very interesting concept because up until this point, we have assumed the role of 0 to define null when the role of 0 just means we have counted no things. That's what the role of the number 0 is. We have counted no things. The number 0 does not mean there is nothing. It just means we have counted no things. Now that's very important. That logical scenario is extremely important because within the construct of programming, computer science, the number 0 is a symbol which exists in our Unicode ASCII2 libraries that is translated by our processors to mean something. Therefore, the number 0 means something to our processor. But if there's nothing inside that storage location, if there's nothing inside that specific position in the virtual memory, we are then left with a null. Arrays can be of any type, including an array type, but an array can only be of one type. I'm going to say that again. An array elements can be any type, including an array type, but the array itself can be only one type. So what do I mean by that? Well, I cannot store multiple different data types in the same array. This is one of the drawbacks to using arrays. This is something that we all kind of poo-poo. But you cannot store multiple data types in an array. There are ways around this. Getting into advanced C#, I can show you some tricks to get around this, things like DTOs. Those are called data transfer objects. But an array in and of itself can only hold one specific data type within the entirety of that array. So if I have an array, I have to initialize, or I have to specify, not initialize, I have to specify the data type of the array to be something. So if I want to save strings to the array, I have to tell the array, you are a string array. But when I do that, and when I do that, not but, and when I do that, only string arrays can be saved. Only string arrays can be saved to that array. And that's what I mean by an array can hold, or array elements can be of any type, but an array can only be of one type. And an array can only hold a single type of variable. Meaning if I, like I said in the example, if I initialize or declare a string array, then I can only initialize or assign strings to that array. I can't assign integers to that array, it'll throw up. I can convert my integer to a string and save it to the string array and then convert it back to an integer after the fact. But I can't save an integer to a string array. I can't, I guess the word save is, I'm using it incorrectly. I cannot assign the value of integer, a variable of data type integer, to an array of data type string. It will not work out. And this is something we're going to go over too in future micro lectures. The number of dimensions are set when the array variable is declared. Remember that an array is immutable. We talked about this with strings. The array length is immutable. That means that when the array is declared, when the array is declared, the array in and of itself must be provided the amount of positions it will soak up in your virtual memory. That is extremely important. And please understand that once you assign that array and say you will only have 8 positions, you cannot at any point in time take that specific array and add another position. What you will have to do is create a new array with one more position and blow away the old one. This is another drawback to arrays. And the reason why this was the case is because in C++ we had buffer overflow problems with arrays. And so going up into Java and C#, we as developers, and I'm glossing over this. I know people say that's not why. Every time I go back in history and start talking about this, that's not why that happened. It actually is why it happened. There's a lot of other things that are probably more important, but that's really that's really why we decided arrays we're not gonna let arrays just expand into in perpetuity. We're gonna say, no, you have to stay a certain size. C++ did institute this at some point in time, but it's still not airtight. Arrays are 0 indexed, all right? So arrays are indexed to the number 0. We talked about this before. In computer science, we always start counting at 0. We don't start counting at the number 1, all right? And in every single mathematics class you will ever take, it seems as though, or arithmetic, I should say, it seems as though we start counting at 1, but that is false. We don't start counting at 1. Remember what I said, 0 doesn't mean nothing. 0 means we count no things. There are no things to count. That's what the number 0 means. It's still a valid number. Just ask Schoolhouse Rock. Okay. Either way, we start counting our positions at 0, which means the first position in your array will always be the 0th position. And array types are reference types, meaning that those reference types or those references come from an abstract class that was built on top of the object class. Or if I invert that, the abstract array class is derived from the object class, which is in and of itself abstract as well. And in order to read or parse through or process all the elements, all the positions in an array, I would need to loop through it. And normally we would use a for loop or a for each loop to iterate through those types of arrays. Single dimensional arrays, you normally only need one loop. When you get into multi-dimensional arrays, you will need more than one loop because a multi-dimensional array will have, well, more dimensions. And you can't loop through more dimensions just using one. You would need a separate loop within the loop, or what we call a nested loop. This is something we didn't speak about in looping, but we will talk about in this specific micro lecture, nested loops. Nested loops are very powerful. And I'm not going to get too deep into it. I was about to go into a diatribe about why, but I think it makes a lot of sense not to do that here and to do that in our multidimensional array micro lecture. Okay, so here are some examples of an array, right? In this first one, we declare a single dimensional array of 5 integers, all right? And this is what we were talking about. So you have integer array. The braces are the shorthand for array, and the data type we want the array to be is either called before or after. It doesn't really matter. You can call this wherever you want. I know people poo-poo that, but you can call this wherever you want in C# on before or after. Best practice is before. Call it before the array braces. The name of the array, this is taboo. Don't use one. I know MSDN did this, but don't use one. Is assigned the new array that is 5 positions. That means that it will go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 being the 5th position, right? We declare a set of array element values. All right, so if I want to initialize an array, remember we initialize variables by assigning it a value when it's declared. Well, in this case, we can initialize an array by assigning it a value once it's declared. Now, when you assign it this value, it will assume the role of how many positions? Yes, 6, which means that it will count 0th position, 1st position, 2nd position, 3rd position, 4th position, 5th position being the 6th area in the array. And if you did array2.length, or I believe it, yeah, array2.length, which is an immutable property of the array that tells you how many positions the array has, it would tell you that there are 6 positions. We can declare a 2-dimensional array, and it looks like I missed some numbers here. Or actually, no, this actually denotes the 2-dimensional, the dimensionality of the multi-dimensionality of the array without the positions, right? We haven't, or without the amount of positions there should be. That'll be declared at the end. And if I want to do that, the first number indicates the first array, meaning the parent array has 2 positions, 0 and 1. And then each subsequent array within that has 3 positions. Or each of the 2 arrays has 3 positions. You can also do it this way as well, which initializes the multi-dimensional array. And then you have jagged arrays, which this is something we're going to go into in a micro lecture, as well as the bottom. And that's it. There's not much to it. Arrays normally bite people pretty hard because they think that they're very difficult, but they're not. They're just really rigid, hard to use. But listen, if you haven't liked or subscribed yet, please do so. It really helps out, and it lets me know what content you guys want to watch, what you guys want to hear about. Either way, as I say in all of my videos, good luck, have fun,